It's not often that I'd have high expectations for a game based off of a somewhat forgettable 90s film, least of all one on a handheld system, but there was something about the Game Boy colours of The Mummy that made it look very, very promising. The Konami logo on the box was enough to catch my attention initially, but this wasn't just any Konami game, but an 8-bit 2D horror-themed Konami game, and historically when you put those things together, very good things happen. It was enough to get me excited, and I couldn't help but wonder if The Mummy was actually a thinly veiled tribute to the classic Castlevania series. Starring Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz, the film was something of a surprise box office hit for Universal Studios when it released in 1999. Though scorned by critics, it nonetheless proved to be an enjoyable action-adventure romp for the popcorn-eating masses. Set in 1926, the plot follows an American adventurer named Rick, a librarian and Egyptologist named Evelyn, and her mischievous and light-fingered brother named Jonathan. The trio, after accidentally discovering and reading from the Book of the Dead, as you do, are embroiled in a battle against the supernatural as they search the ancient ruins of Egypt to find a way of stopping the deadly rampage of the reawakened titular mummy, Imhotep. A year and a half later, the video game adaptation would finally arrive on the Game Boy Color, late in the year 2000. The game was developed by Konami's Nagoya branch, and somewhat surprisingly for a licensed game of this era, it follows roughly the same plot and locations seen in the film. Starting out as Evelyn, the first level has the player searching for 4 books which are spread throughout the stage. Evelyn's controls are simple. She can move around with the D-pad, jump with the A button, and can pick up and use items with the B button. Providing that she's not holding an item, she can also run by holding the B button. To complete the level, you must find the 4 books which are scattered throughout, and then make your way to the exit. To reach the books, the player must use Evelyn to leap across gaps, stand on switches to create platforms, collect and read from ancient stone inscriptions to open blocked off routes, and generally navigate the maze-like layout of one-way doors and drops. The map is made up of individual fixed screens and is laid out in a grid. When you reach the edge of the map, you will seamlessly loop around to the opposite side. Seeing an item on a platform out of reach above will instinctively have you trying to figure out a way of climbing up, but in this game the way to reach it is just as likely to be a matter of making your way down until you literally fall onto it. It's a real throwback to 80s game design that was all but unheard of by the year 2000. After finding the 4 books and walking through the exit, the stage is complete. You are rewarded with a simple 4-character password to continue from. This is the basic premise of the game, and although the specific collectibles and the amount required will change with each stage, the gameplay is essentially the same throughout the game's 46 levels. As the game progresses, however, more elements are added to keep things interesting. Firstly, Jonathan joins Evelyn as a playable character, and can instantly be switched in or out with the press of the start button. Jonathan controls somewhat similarly to Evelyn, though he cannot jump as well nor can he run. Instead, however, he can pick up and use dynamite to destroy breakable walls, and this is his main use throughout the game. Care must be taken though, as the resulting blast is fatal if he sticks around for too long. The dynamite is a finite resource too, with limited amounts placed in the stages, and Jonathan can only pick up and hold one at a time. Misusing a stick or using one in the wrong order can often mean having to restart the stage entirely. When he's not fondling explosives, he can also throw a haymaker of a punch, which soon comes in handy as the game also starts to introduce enemy characters. The early enemies in the game vary from rats to armed robbers, but their role is always to be more of a nuisance than a challenge to the player. Nothing is gained from killing them, as they will simply respawn again a few seconds later. Under the constant onslaught, taking hits is inevitable, but thankfully each character has their own health bar to soak up damage, though care must still be taken to avoid being whittled down and killed. Last but not least to join the party is Rick. Rick's jumping ability is the worst of the bunch, but like the others he has his own unique set of skills. Firstly, like any self-respecting American, he is armed with a pistol and infinite ammo, allowing him to take out those pesky enemies from a safe distance. As well as this, he can occasionally find and use a rifle to shoot switches from a distance, though ammo is limited to a few precious rounds. What's more, he won't be able to use his pistol to fend off enemies whilst holding the rifle, and so only picking it up once you know what you need to do with it is essential. Lastly, he has the ability to push certain objects and, bizarrely, people, who don't seem to bat an eyelid when being manhandled off a ledge, and can use them to create platforms, clear paths and activate switches. Once again, being a trial and error focused game, failure is pretty much inevitable, and often you will find yourself having made a wrong move and unable to continue. Mercifully, Konami thought to include a suicide command to quickly restart a level by pressing start A and B. There are infinite continues too, and so other than having to start over, there is no real punishment for dying in the game. Most levels require constant switching with numerous character-specific obstacles to tackle throughout. Each of the characters can hold one item at a time, and as well as the ones mentioned previously, there are also more general items which can be used by anyone. Rocks can be found and thrown as a weapon, torches can be carried to light up dark areas which are otherwise pitch black, and health vials can be used to instantly refill the life bar of whichever character picks one up. Having one of the characters die midway through a level often makes the remainder unbeatable for the remaining two, so strategic switching to protect those on low health and efficient use of the health vials is necessary for success. As the game progresses, the environmental hazards and enemies begin to ramp up in difficulty. Spike pits, steam jets, moving platforms and mirror puzzles all need to be dealt with on a regular basis. Mummies and zombies that take numerous shots to take down begin to appear, as well as the game's antagonist Imhotep, who can take out the heroes with a single hit. It becomes a tricky and occasionally frustrating affair to deal with the respawning enemies, all whilst trying to figure out the route to the needed collectibles. Mercifully, for those who just want to focus on the puzzle element of the game, a variation of the infamous Konami code can be used on the title screen to make the characters invulnerable from enemy attacks. Spikes and quicksand will still prove deadly, but it certainly makes the latter levels a lot less frustrating. The presentation of the game is fairly underwhelming, but nevertheless does have a certain retro charm that's in keeping with the old school gameplay. The characters have stiff animation and lack detail, but are at least colourful and distinct. The levels themselves can be a little dull and repetitive, which can make navigating the maze-like layouts a little more confusing than it perhaps ought to be. Thankfully, the music is far more appealing, with some truly memorable Egyptian-themed chiptunes on offer, as well as some more forgettable ones. As you've probably figured out by now, my initial prediction of The Mummy being a rebranded Castlevania was a long way off the mark. In reality, The Mummy is essentially a puzzle game disguised as an action platformer. Each level is an exercise in trial and error as you try to figure out the best sequence to reach all of the collectibles and then the exit, and at times it feels closer to a sliding tile puzzle than a Castlevania game. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, and in many ways The Mummy does pay homage to more obscure origins, with elements of Konami's own The Goonies being somewhat noticeable. Overall, The Mummy wasn't at all what I was expecting, but nevertheless it is undoubtedly a game that many will enjoy. Whilst some won't appreciate the trial and error focused gameplay, the 46 levels will provide a lengthy challenge for fans of old school puzzle platformers. It is unashamedly video gamey in its level design, with the developers not letting logic or reason get in the way of their core gameplay. Konami weren't content to throw out a hastily thrown together licensed game, and instead created a lovingly crafted throwback to a bygone era of gaming. So, if you like what you've heard, then why not pick up a copy of The Mummy for your Game Boy Color? It's an adventure that will take you to the ancient depths of the lost city of Harmonoptera, and will test your brain and reflexes to their limit as you try to defeat the mysterious and deadly mummy Imhotep.